Paramount Theater, Vermont Coffee Company, which has provided the very nice iced coffee and treats in the hallway there, and PEGTV, which is live streaming the event. I'm introducing the moderator, Mark Johnson. And Mark is a longtime editor and reporter in Vermont. He started out at the Free Press in Burlington and went on to become a celebrity on the Mark Johnson Show, which I'm sure he'll kick me for after the event, for saying. He's now, like I said, a senior editor and reporter at VT Digger. And we're ready to go, I believe.
Can I kick you right now while you're up here? Thank you very much for joining us tonight here, everybody at the Paramount Theater. We are going to get right down to business tonight. Let me just give you the format that we're going to be using tonight. And we're going to be asking the candidates a series of questions. Most of them are going to be coming from our readers who sent us close to 100 questions over the past week. There will be some questions that I start us off with as well, and we are going to get right to questions. We'll give the candidates an opportunity to have closing statements at the end. Before we start, if you wouldn't mind, just make sure to check your cell phone, make sure that it's off. Also, I'd ask if you could hold your applause. We'll introduce the candidates. You're welcome to applaud then, and then I'd ask you to hold it until the end. The format we're going to use tonight, we're going to alternate questions back and forth between the candidates. We'll give them 90 seconds, up to 90 seconds for an answer, a 60-second rebuttal, and if I feel that we need to go further on a particular topic, we will. Without any further ado, I want to welcome our candidates tonight, Democrat Christine Hallquist and also Republican Phil Scott. Let's give them both a hand.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll start our questions tonight with a question. We're actually going to break the format a little bit here at the beginning. I have a specific question for the two candidates, and I'd like to give you 90 seconds each to answer them. Mr. Scott, the state ethics... Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you very much.
By those two candidates, Vermont Digger and Galway, and the sponsors here tonight.
Thank you very much.
I ask you one more time, we'll stand down so we're all allowed to debate.
Thank you, sir. I think you made your point at this point now. You're taking time away from the candidates. Thank you very much. Governor Scott, the State Ethics Commission recently found that you are in violation of the state's code of ethics. This is a charge which you have dismissed and said is politically motivated. One of the solutions that was suggested is that the former company that you own, Du Bois Construction, not bid on state contracts while you're in office. Is that a recommendation you would support?
Well, let's go back a little bit. Mark, this was litigated 2 years ago during the campaign, literally 2 years ago. It was brought up about my connection. I was a co-owner of Du Bois Construction. Been in the family for a number of years. I was a co-owner for over 30 years. And I said I didn't want it to be an issue. I knew I didn't have to do this, but I took the unprecedented step of saying I'll sell my share of the business, which I did. So after January, after I was sworn into office, I laid it all out. I had the media come in, had a press conference, and talked about just exactly what we were doing. And what transpired, because it is a small business, many small businesses in Vermont can't obtain financing, can't go to a bank and borrow money, especially within a 2-month period. So I offered to finance the business in order for it to stay open. So that was litigated again, transparently. And then 2 years later, in the legislature, I signed into law an ethics commission. And they came up with their code of ethics over the last 2 or 3 months. And then there was a complaint issued recently, right before the election, to litigate it again. So from my standpoint, it seemed unfair with a complaint. Nobody oversaw what the code of ethics were going to be. It was just the panel that was put into this, onto this commission. So from my standpoint, again, I can't go back. I've signed a contract. I can't go back and say to Du Bois Construction, you can't do any state work. I mean, that would be a violation of the contract. I mean, it just couldn't happen in that respect. So I'm in a quandary at this point. I have no connection with Du Bois Construction at this point in time. I'm just the bank, and so that they could continue to do business. So at this point, again, it's a transparent process. All the bids are solicited and transparently opened. And some of you are in the construction business, understand that in Vermont, and you see that, very public. So again, from my standpoint, I thought it was suspect that it was done by a very powerful political organization that isn't exactly in my camp.
Ms. Hallquist, you served as the Chief Executive Officer of the Vermont Electric Co-op. In fact, it's one of your real selling points. But it's not a company where you started as the CEO. Why, entering now politics, do you want to start in essentially the CEO position and not move up through the ranks?
Well, I think if you look at my long history, I've had a long history of leadership. It didn't start at Vermont Electric Cooperative. If you look, I really believe that when you're, you need to look at a resume and the background of a person. And I've had a long history of collaborative leadership and doing some pretty impressive things. I also have been, I love Vermont. I've been involved with civic activities in Vermont, served on local school board, chaired mental health board, been the town moderator the past 5 years. Certainly, I do believe my leadership qualifies me. And of course, Phil Scott's been in office for 18 years. So I think we Vermonters have a real choice. I look at what I voted for Phil Scott, and I'm disappointed. This wasn't in my career plan. But when Phil talks about taking care of the most vulnerable, and vetoes a minimum wage bill, vetoes a bill on family leave, vetoes a toxic and toys bill, and vetoes a bill that makes polluters pay, I question what affordability that means. It certainly isn't affordability for those on the lowest part of the income ladder. So I'm in this race because it's an obligation to the people of the state of Vermont.
The first policy question I want to ask you
Can I just say something
ahead,
to that?
please.
I just want to make perfectly clear, I've never voted for Christine.
My first policy question, we'll start with Ms. Hallquist, is about the minimum wage. Could you both please justify your positions? You are in support of the minimum wage. What is the economic theory or analysis that you're depending on that says that that's the right direction to go? And Mr. Scott, I'll have you answer the same question, why you don't think it is.
Well, I just want to point out that for the bottom 80% of the bottom 80% of America, the working class of America, we haven't seen any real wage growth since the early 80s in terms of adjusted for inflation. If we had adjusted the minimum wage for the inflation since the late 60s, it'd be $22 an hour right now. And what does it cost to live in a two-bedroom unit in Chittenden County? It's $22 an hour. So we're in this place now where people aren't making a living wage. They have to work 2 or 3 jobs. It's been a systematic attack, and it's been a GOP policy. It started with Ronald Reagan. It started with the myth of trickle-down. It started with an attack on the unions. So now we're in this place today where people have to work 2 or 3 jobs, and they still can't afford their homes. So this is not necessarily, I don't call this a political issue. I call this part of being in a civilized society. This is basic and important. Now, I also will tell you that, I know how to control costs. We didn't have a rate increase for 5 years. But a good business person knows that you've got to grow the revenues. And we're going to grow the revenues by connecting every home and business with fiber optic cable and rebuild our downtowns, and people will flock to Vermont. We will see a growing economy that it can afford those increases?
Well, first of all, I just want to make perfectly clear, I want to make sure that all Vermonters make more money. What we've seen over the last few years, there are a couple ways to do it. You know, I think the goal, we can all agree, I believe, both sides of the issue, that we want Vermonters to keep more money in their pockets. What we've been doing over the last decade or two is just raising taxes, increasing the burden on Vermonters. And what that's done is prevented them from keeping more money in their pocket. So the answer for some is a knee-jerk reaction in some respects to just artificially raise the minimum wage. That'll take care of it, right? Well, that just raises the cost of living throughout. And from my standpoint, Chittenden County's doing pretty well. They're doing okay. They could do better, but they're doing pretty well. But the rest of the state, the other 13 counties, are struggling. And when you think about the rural areas of our state, when you think about the Connecticut River, right within swimming distance of New Hampshire, New Hampshire's minimum wage is $7.25. There's no sales tax in New Hampshire. There's no income tax in New Hampshire. But those businesses, all those families, all the people along that are struggling just to get by, just hanging on by a thread, are being subjected to some of the penalties, the burdens, the taxes that we keep increasing on them throughout the years. So that's why I went through the last 2 years, we didn't raise a single tax or fee. And that gives Vermonters a break. And right now, when I was in the Senate, we passed a minimum wage increase. I remember that distinctly. And I remember somebody getting up on the floor and saying, if we pass this minimum wage, if we increase the minimum wage right now with a cost of living increase, we'll never have to have this debate again. Well, here we are. We're having the debate again. Now it's going to be raised again. The cost of living adjustment is going to kick in January. It's going to go up to, I think it's like $10.75, something like that. Not enough to live on, but it's a good entry-level wage for those students, people that are trying to get into the workforce. But at the same time, that will increase over time. As we grow this economy, which we're doing, that rate of increase will continue to grow.
Take another minute.
Yeah, well, one of the things I'll point out, you know, by talking about the New Hampshire, you know, if you believe that you shouldn't be raising the minimum wage because of New Hampshire, well, I would think that means all of Vermont should be at 7.25. So I don't think that's a solid argument.
I don't think you've been going over to New Hampshire, going on the border much outside of Chittenden County. You'll find out that they're struggling to get by. They're not making it.
So why wouldn't we
The
lower it to
businesses,
7.25?
because the businesses aren't going to be there anymore. They're not going to be employed anymore.
Okay, I mean, my point being, this is continuing to be the same GOP rhetoric that we've seen since Ronald Reagan. And I want to remind everybody that don't buy that trickle down anymore.
I voted for a minimum wage increase when I was in the Senate. It's tied to a cost of living increase.
Amazon recently said they were going to increase it to $15. I mean,
That's great.
are they wrong?
No government intervention there. They did it on their own because it made business sense. Supply and demand is working. When I go out throughout the state, I'm going to different parts of the state. You go to Mack Molding, they want 100 people right now. GE wants 100 people. UTC up in Virginia, they're going to hire 150 people. The wage for an engineer at UTC is $100,000 a year salary. There are jobs throughout the Northeast Kingdom. So there are jobs available, and supply and demand is going to work because guess what? We don't have enough workers for the jobs we have here right now. So the wage is going up. There was a sign at a creamy stand, hiring for $17 an hour, filling creamies this summer.
Let's talk about one of the issues that's facing rural Vermont. I was at a conference recently on the Vermont Council on Rural Development, and the participants there highlighted what they felt were the issues that were most problematic in rural Vermont. And the number one issue, far and away, 2-to-1, was affordable housing. Mr. Scott, let's start with you. What can be done, particularly in the rural areas, to deal with this problem?
Well, we're doing it. You know, in my first year in office, even though we didn't raise a single tax or fee for the general fund budget over 2 years, we did make investments. We prevented $71 million worth of property tax increases. We lowered income taxes by 30 million, removed the tax on Social Security for low and moderate income Vermonters for Social Security. But we also, during that time, the first year, worked with the legislature, and we passed a bond, a $35 million housing bond. Now, we've been talking about we need more housing, but we need more housing for the workforce is what we need. So we passed this bond, $35 million, and it's going to leverage another $65 million in private assets, making it the single largest investment in housing Vermont has ever seen. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight, but it will happen, and we're addressing that. So again, we have, the good news is, even though there are fewer people working today than there were in 2009, we've actually increased the number of jobs, people in the workforce since January by 4,000. That's great news. But when I talk to students, when they're graduating, what they want is, first, they want a good paying job. That's what they want in their field of interest. Check that. We have jobs available in Vermont. Second is they want decent, affordable housing. So check that too. We've all pulled together, pulling in the same direction. We understand we need more housing, and we've done it. But the third thing, they do the math. It has to be affordable for them. And that's the area we have to work on. That's why we didn't raise any tax or fees over 2 years.
Well, let me point out some data here again. You know, no matter where you go in Vermont, it costs about $250,000 minimum to build a two-bedroom unit. In order to afford a two-bedroom unit, you have to make $22 an hour. So again, I'm going to go back to the fact that our real earning power hasn't gone up, and if it costs $22 an hour to live in a home, and you're only making $10 an hour, we have to help out by subsidizing. Now, what the housing partnerships tell me today is that $35 million bond is only about 10% of what we need in order to support housing. And there are some very good models that we can use, such as a shared mortgage model, where the housing partnership will help buy down the cost of the home and share in the appreciation of the home for young people who want to get into a home. But at the lowest rungs of the economic model, we have to do a lot of work. If you've been in Burlington, we have a lot of homeless people. We have a lot of homeless people in many of our towns. And I noticed, you know, the recent discussion about, well, let's see if we can ban panhandling. No, that's not the way to solve the problem, to make it disappear. We have an obligation, and I support a housing model, a housing first model, where people can get into their homes regardless of their substance use issues, because we'll have an opportunity to help them when they're in those homes. So we have to get involved. As long as people aren't making a living wage, we have a responsibility. When I talk about a living wage, Medicare for all, and ending homelessness, that's not a political issue. That's called being in a civilized society.
10% of what is needed?
Well, 10%, they're $35 million. I said that it's going to leverage another $65 million. So by that math, and I haven't checked the math, but if by that math, you know, we're maybe 30% there.
20%.
It's a start. Well, 35, 65, and 30.
That's a pain. You're not there.
So the point is, though, we have a ways to go. We know that. But at least we took a step. We took it together. I mean, that's the important part. The advocates from the housing side, we all work together in order to do this. And I think that's important. But just don't forget, it's not just about building the home. I mean, they're expensive to build. It's maintaining it. When I say maintaining it, I mean paying your taxes. The burden that you have placed on you is enormous. So I've been hearing about property taxes ever since I started in office, about screaming for relief because of the high cost of education. So we have to fix that as well. It's not just building them; it's being able to afford to live there.
Can I take a little bit? Sure. Let me just point out the flaw in the property tax model of funding education. We have to move to an income-based model, because if you look at the 2019 education budget, if you're making less than $150,000, between $30,000 and $150,000, you're paying between 2.3 and 2.5% of your income for property taxes. But and it goes down. When you hit $1 million, you're only paying 0.5%. So we've got to move to a more income-based model for supporting our education system. And an income-based model would allow older people and people on fixed incomes to stay in their homes. So I believe that part of this answer is restructuring our tax system. And when I say that, I'm not talking about increasing taxes. I'm talking about restructuring it so it's more fair.
Well,
Okay.
they're going to increase.
All right,
okay?
we're gonna go-
Wait,
but-
anybody here making $1 million a year? Anybody? 500,000? 300? No takers? The point is that somebody's going to pay more if you go to an income tax and you're not addressing the spending side. I mean, that's a basic fundamental. I mean, it's pretty easy math. If you don't fix the spending, then somebody's paying more. It's coming out of a different pocket somewhere.
Let me stop you there. We're going to go to the next question, which will be on this same topic. Can you please explain what you mean by some alternative way other than the property tax that isn't just reshuffling the same deck?
Well, first of all, let's look at the facts here. If you've got a budget item, and you've got to pay for that budget item, changing the way you pay for it doesn't change the total cost of that budget item. So what I'm talking about, I'll just talk about one example of the unfairness of our tax system. You know, 4 years ago, I'm doing my daughter's taxes, and she made 1/4 what I made it, yet she paid twice the percentage in taxes. So I've talked to thousands of Vermonters, and wealthy Vermonters tell me they want to pay their fair share. When you ask the question about paying fair share, you get out of this divisive stuff by saying, you know, no new taxes, no new taxes. What I hear when I talk to Vermonters is the wealthy people are mad, and they say, you raise my taxes, I'm going to leave the state. And the people on the other end of the income ladder say, oh, let's just tax the rich and we'll be successful. But when you ask the question, will you pay your fair share? I give you unanimous yes.
Boy, the people I'm talking to think they are paying their fair share and more. They feel that they need a break, and that's why we did what we did. The legislature followed suit. They obviously have heard the same thing that I have. So we have the most progressive tax system in the country, right here in Vermont. So I'm not sure how many of these rich people we have left in Vermont, because they are moving out, and we have data to back that up.
Want to take another minute?
I don't think I need to say any more on this one.
Let's, Mr. Scott, your call for no taxes the past 2 years, recently you've indicated a willingness to talk about raising fees. What do you mean?
Well, every year throughout the last, when I was in the Senate, 10 years in the Senate, every year there was a fee bill, and every year the fees went up in some capacity. What I've said to my administration, to my cabinet, is that I want them to take a look. It's been 2 years, and typically every year there's a fee bill, but it has been 2 years since we've done anything. So the cost of living has gone up, and we should take a look. And if you can make, it's going to be a high bar, but if you can make the argument for an increase, we'll take a look. But maybe after taking a look, I also asked them to take a look to see if we could eliminate some or lower some, because there's some inequity there as well. I mean, it's not always just raising everything. We should look, as I do in business, we try and get more efficient every day. And when you do that, you look for areas of opportunity. So I've just said, take a look. I'm willing to listen, but it's going to be a high bar.
Maybe as part of this too, you could address your overall, Mr. Scott's tax philosophy too.
Yeah, you know, again, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to take this to a different place, because, you know, no new taxes is not a good plan for the state of Vermont. I get cost control. I ran an electric utility. We didn't have rate increases for 5 years, and our average rate increase was 0.8% for 10 years. Every good business person, a good business person, knows how to control costs. And we excelled at that. But a good business person knows you've got to get more revenue. You can cost control yourself out of business. And that's where I strongly differ from Phil Scott. I have a plan to grow Vermont. I know, let me tell you some things about Vermont. Vermont's pretty awesome. We have the highest education performance in the nation. We're the healthiest state in the nation. We're the safest state in the nation. We've got amazing views, and our people are amazing. We connect every home and business with fiber. We're going to have entrepreneurial businesses coming to Vermont who want to be here. I've talked to many of those businesses who say, I can't locate in rural Vermont. 2/3 of Vermont is rural. 2/3 of Vermonters live in rural Vermont. And they can't get connected. You cannot run a business today if you can't get connected. And our copper infrastructure is wholly inadequate to achieve the goals we need to achieve. So rebuilding those downtowns using the tax increment financing model, same thing that's caused this renaissance in St. Albans, that's happening in Springfield, it's happening at the Putnam block in Bennington. We rebuild those downtowns, we connect with fiber, we're going to put more food on the table so we're not continuing to fight over the scraps.
I don't know where to begin. There's so much there. Okay, first of all, we didn't raise any tax or fees, right? So we agree with that. We didn't actually cut spending. We increased spending. Our budget went up through natural growth. We brought more revenue in. Actually, after 2 years of not raising taxes and fees, making the investments in the areas that give us the highest return, we had more on the bottom line. We had a surplus for the first time in a decade. So we did that. What she's we agree, and I agree. We have a great quality of life here. We can sell that all day long. But what we need is affordability to go along with it, and we've shown we can do it. And again, we brought more revenue in. Our revenues are growing. We put more people to work. There'll be more. Think about that. If we can put all the people to work that we have jobs open for, there'll be more revenue streaming in from income taxes, from those buying homes, having families, bringing in property taxes, buying goods and services. It's all good when you focus on the economy. That's why my first day in office, I talked about that. I said the guiding principles of our administration is to grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable. And we've done all three of those. And we're going to continue to do that. If I'm elected in November, we'll continue with that approach, trying to make the investments we need. And I'd love to get into broadband a little bit as well. And Christine is right. We need that here in Vermont. But what you might be interested in, what's really interesting, when you take the top 10 villages and cities and towns in our state that have the highest capacity broadband, fastest broadband, you might be surprised what they are. Burlington's one, that's no surprise. But on that list, Bennington, Springfield, Brattleboro, Newport, not exactly thriving areas right now. So my point is this: we need that. We're going to continue to grow in that respect. The TIF districts do work, and that's why we advocated for 6 more, and the legislature went along with that, so we did it, and we're going to do some more as well. But it's not the total answer. Broadband's not the total answer. We need everything. It has to be affordable.
Take one more minute.
Yeah, in my role as the leader of the co-op, we served 18 of the 25 poorest communities in Vermont, and now they could go up and tell them how great they're doing. Places like Island Pond.
I was there yesterday.
Yeah.
They're doing pretty good.
So the point is, and you got to understand, the state definition of broadband is wholly inadequate for what we need to achieve. The cities right now are averaging 70 megabits per second. They're going to grow to 200 megabits per second by 2021. Our copper infrastructure maximum is capable of 10 megabits per second. So you talk to rural Vermonters like me, who at my home, every time it rains, I have to reset my modem, and I couldn't possibly have more than 1 or 2 people on that, and I have the best copper connection available. I think you're a little disconnected from what's happening in rural
Well,
Vermont.
I'm not sure about that. I get out every single day. I was up in the Northeast Kingdom all day yesterday, and they do have high-speed internet access in Newport. It needs to be expanded. Going to the last mile is going to be tremendously difficult, and fiber is part of the answer. I mean, we do. Velco has fiber running throughout their whole line. We can tap onto that. I'm sure we can make a deal with Velco. But at the same time, we're focusing on those downtowns because that's where the millennials want to go. You know that here in Rutland. You're growing, you're putting new apartments and so forth in the second floors of a lot of buildings throughout the downtown because they want to be here. They want to be connected. They want to be part of the community.
You get the final word this round.
I have nothing more to say.
I want to talk about the environment. The committee that reports to the United Nations just put out a report this week, said 12 years and then pretty much lights out for the environment. What is that? How did you react to that report, and what did it say to you as a candidate for governor?
Well, I should tell you, that report was no surprise to me. I committed my life to solving climate change. Again, this wasn't necessarily something I had on my career path. In 2004, I went to Quebec City to listen for 3 days to the Intergovernmental Climate Change Commission report on what carbon was doing to our climate. And one of the things they pointed out was, you know, when we hit this 2-degree set point of increase, we're going to have a step function in what's going to happen to our environment. We saw this coming. And then if you see what's happened and you follow the global temperatures, you can see they were accelerating every year. So the fact that we're in worse shape, that's no surprise to me. Now, I focused on this. This has been my life's work. When I left the co-op, we were 96% carbon free. We were offering incentives for people to move away from fossil fuel heating, cooling, and transportation, and we did it without a rate increase for 5 years, proving that you can solve climate change, does not need to cost more money. There's also a documentary, if you really, you know, I keep saying, you know, look at people's history. There's a documentary about my work called Denial Documentary. I've been focused on this issue, and I know we can achieve those goals. But it's going to take all of us pulling together, and I want to tell you how this is going to help economic development. We export $2 billion a year from the state to fossil fuel industry. We bring that money into the state, we'll have all kinds of innovation and jobs. I loved my job at the co-op. We were attracting some of the best engineers in the nation, and we were doing all kinds of innovative things. It was exciting work. So solving climate change is exciting work. It can be done. Don't let anybody tell you anything different.
Well, as I've said consistently over the last 2 or 3 years, climate change is real. We just have to look at today. 82 degrees set a record in Burlington. So we know things are changing. We can't debate that. But we have the means to do something about it. That's why we in Vermont, we joined the U.S. Climate Alliance with other states after the president withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. I created the Vermont Climate Action Commission to take a look at what we can do better together. What can we agree to and work towards that, pulling in the same direction. We've worked with our regional partners to update the zero emission vehicle plan. And then we joined the Vermont Climate Pledge Coalition with the City of Burlington and others. So we are committed, I'm committed to 90% renewable by 2050. That's a goal that was set by the legislature and the previous administration. I believe we can do it. It's going to take some technology changes. 60% of our carbon emissions is with transportation, it's with vehicles. So we're going to have to transition to electric vehicles. But we have to have the infrastructure in order to charge in the meantime. So that's why we're using some of the VW money, the settlement money, to improve that infrastructure, to grow that infrastructure on I-89 corridor, I-91 corridor. And we're doing that right now. We're using some other money that became available to us to buy a couple of electric buses as well. We need to transition. We've got to move in this direction. Elon Musk believes that we'll have 90% electric vehicles within the next 20 years, and they'll be autonomous as well. They'll be self-driving. I'm not sure I like that part, but the electric vehicle part is something that I believe is happening. It's happening right before our eyes. When you see Harley-Davidson come out with a line of electric motorcycles, you know things are changing in the U.S.
Well, I want to point out, you know, that's why I'm running for governor. I'm disappointed because I was happy when you signed on the Paris Climate Accord, but then you didn't do anything. You know, I will tell you that I spent 2.5 years working with Vermont Energy Investment Corporation on a grant from the Department of Energy to define exactly how we're going to get to 90% by 2050. It's called the Solar Pathways Plan. I would make that the comprehensive energy plan. And I want to point out a flaw in the governor's statement here. Governor says we don't need wind. I got news for you. We got to grow wind in order to achieve our goals because the wind blows like crazy in the winter. but it doesn't in the summer when the sun's shining and the sun doesn't shine in the winter. But, you know, I understand the difficulty we have when we put turbines on ridge lines, because I led that Kingdom Community Wind Project, and I saw what it did to the communities. We don't need to get our wind from Vermont. The average cost of that power coming from that wind turbine is going to be 10 cents over the life of the project. You get it for 5 cents from the Midwest, and it only costs 2 cents to transport it. So our goal should be to solve climate change, and I certainly have put my work where my mouth is.
Listen, I'm not opposed to wind development in other states or other countries. I'm opposed to having wind development on our ridgelines. I'm opposed to that. I was reminded of that last night, coming back from the Northeast Kingdom, coming down through Albany, through Craftsbury, and taking a look at the destruction, I believe, that's been done by the wind turbines here in Vermont. And I want to, we haven't put up a single one since I came into office, and I'm going to try and prevent that from happening in the future. The solar is part of the answer. We're developing. We have the largest solar array in the state being built right now in Plymouth, not far from here, in Plymouth. And they work together, work with the community, and we're able to do that. I believe that that's the answer for the future. I also believe the battery storage is going to be key here. Large-scale battery storage is going to make renewables make more sense. And we're working on that. Dynapower, right here in Vermont, is on the cutting edge of doing some really amazing things with that, because you're going to have to store it somehow, because you can't, the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time, so you have to store it in some capacity. So we also have, that's why our relationship with Canada is so important. They're energy rich. They're energy rich up there. They have hydro. They have wind, and they're willing to sell it to us. And we're also willing to be a conduit for other big areas like Connecticut and Massachusetts as well, because we have a line that goes through that was fully permitted, can go right down through Lake Champlain and feed renewable power to those communities.
Can I do one more?
Go ahead. Take
Yeah.
another.
You know, I think this shows the governor's lack of understanding. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not saying we should put wind on our ridge lines, but wind needs to be
You did
part-
that. You already did that.
And like I say, I learned a good lesson from that. But what I am saying is I'm committed to solve climate change. You can't take all the energy from the sun and move it to January. If you look what's happened, Vermont, every time Vermont's set its peak now, there's been no solar available. So what I want everyone to understand is it's going to take a lot of work to get to 90% by 2050. I'm not just throwing out rhetoric here. There's a plan. But saying that we don't need wind and saying we can store the energy from July and bring it to January, that is physically impossible.
Again, I didn't say, I said no wind on our ridgelines. Hydro from Quebec is something that we're already taking advantage of. We can take advantage of it more. They're willing to sell it to us, and we can solve this problem. It can be all renewable as far as I'm concerned. We can get all our power from there. We don't have to go elsewhere. We shut down Vermont Yankee. I know you bought a lot of power from nuclear as part of the no carbon, but that's okay. I mean, that's part of that was part of your portfolio. But we can do this with more than just the solar arrays here in the state. We've got a great relationship with Canada, and we can build upon that.
Anything you want to add?
No, that's good.
Is there any circumstance under which you would support a carbon tax?
No.
Thanks.
I'm going to just make it simple. I would never write anything off the table without taking a deep dive and looking into it. You know, I think these, again, you know, that's political rhetoric, making pledges that you're not going to look at innovative solutions. So you won't find me pledging on anything, because I want the flexibility to come up with the best solutions. And that's really how we got to 96% carbon free. So I challenge that that's political rhetoric.
Can you explain why you would oppose to it?
Because it would hurt our state. I mean, you think about what this would do to the rural areas of our state. Again, Chittenden County's doing okay. It could be doing better, but it's doing okay. But think about the other communities throughout Vermont and the amount of, they can't afford always to buy something different to either heat their home or to drive a zero-emission vehicle. They just can't afford to buy that. And they have to travel longer distances than they do in other places in highly populated areas. So this would be a very regressive tax on both the rural areas of this state, amongst those who are burdened the most, as well. It would put us on an island. You know, we could try and compete with New Hampshire and Mass and New York and every single day, and that would put us out of kilter with them, just adding another tax to an already overtaxed state.
I also want to make a point out that in my learning on solving climate change, I certainly recognize that those people living on the economic margins, that they're struggling. Anything we do, everything that we would do under my administration, we would pass through that filter of how does this impact those people that are living on the lowest economic margin. Obviously, Phil has made his decisions with vetoing the bills he has. So I question when we talk about affordability with the track record. You know, people need to look at the track record. And we didn't have a rate increase for 5 years. We kept our rates relatively flat for 10 years because we serve some of those poorest towns in Vermont. Yet we still managed to get 96% carbon free. So my point being, let's look at all the innovations and let's look how to do this, but let's not put more economic burden on folks, of course.
A lot of questions we received about school consolidation, a lot of questions about your support or non-support of what is described as forced consolidations if communities are not able to figure out a solution on their own. Ms. Hallquist, we'll start with you.
Yeah, the rural school is the heart of the community. You know, I have a positive view of the future. Phil keeps talking about the $30,000 loss of students. Guess what? That's been the demographic shift that's been happening in all of rural America. We're a microcosm of rural America. I spent 10 years studying this. I was on the Technical and Strategies Advisory Board for the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association that serves all of rural America with electricity. This pattern we saw was the same pattern we saw in the 1930s when the cities had electricity and rural America did not. That's why we built this model to carry fiber to every home and business. So if you believe that we're basically screwed, we're heading down the tubes, you say, oh yeah, let's close those schools. I got news for you. We're going to grow this state, and we're going to put people back in those schools. But I'll also make another point. You close those schools, and people aren't going to move to those communities. And my heart goes out to some of those parents that put their kids on a school bus for 2 hours a day. You know, we have this situation where people have to work 2 or 3 jobs because they aren't making a living wage. Then we make it more difficult by closing their schools. I believe, and I know, that when you ask the employees for solution, you get the best answers. Barking orders out of Montpelier and setting arbitrary goals and then beating up the teachers and school boards is not the way you're going to get the good answer. My life experience in leadership shows the best answers come from the employees, not from management. So I would be working collaboratively with those school boards and those teachers to come up with best answers. And they've given us some great answers already on how to improve the productivity of the schools.
Let's go back and set up the problem, okay? And I know you don't want to hear this, but we have lost 30,000 students in the last 20 years. 3 students a day. That continues. That decline continues. So think about that. We were serving 103,000 kids 20 years ago, and now it's under 75,000, and that continues to drop. But we're spending $1.7 billion. $1.7 billion, the single largest expenditure in state government by far. When you think about our whole budget, $6 billion budget, let's round it off, $6 billion. A little over half of that is state dollars. The rest of it is federal. So 1.6 or 1.7 billion is state dollars. So again, we need to do something. We can't continue down this path. We can't keep spending throwing money into an infrastructure that isn't working. That's why I want to go to this cradle to career continuum of learning. We spend this much money for our K through 12, this much, at $1.7 billion. The majority of that is spent there. We spend this much, 5% or under, for early care and learning. We spend this much for higher education, about 5% as well. And the rest, the 90%, K through 12. We know, science tells us, we know a child's brain develops immensely fast, 0 to 5. We need to invest more in early care and learning. That's what we need to do. Now, Act 46 wasn't my idea. This was passed by a Democratic legislature with a Democratic governor. So it's not my idea, but at least they took that step. At least they knew something's wrong. We have to do something. So they went up, they're trying to do something with the governance structure, trying to consolidate the governance. But when you have schools like Rochester High School, they got down to 2 students in their entire high school before they closed. It shouldn't take that long. And
So-
think about the quality of education that those 2 kids were getting. I would say it's not equal with other parts of the state. That's why we have to do something different.
That's a yes on forced consolidations?
Not forced consolidation, because they're making the decision themselves. Rochester made the decision themselves. When you have a governance that's combined, when you bring in other regions, you can look for cost savings, because all of a sudden you find out there are many duplications throughout the education system. Maybe you can help each other out. Maybe you can make things work. Maybe you can reduce the class sizes. Maybe you can do something different with the grade system. I don't know. But I know when they reduce the governance, then they'll start talking about what we can do to make this more efficient. But again, we need to invest more earlier.
Well, I should point out that these teachers and these school boards are ready to talk and ready to come up with solutions. You know, I will point out that there were 44 alternative plans submitted under Act 46 for 90 schools that don't want to close. So clearly, there are schools that don't want to close, and we have alternative plans. Those plans were submitted to the Education Department and rejected. They're now at the Education Board. Let's hope we have some level of sensitivity to those rural schools. But let me just add one more thing, too. You know, it goes back to, again, I'm going to continue to point out that we are in control of our destiny, and we can put plans to increase the number of students in those schools over the long term. And we can work with the teachers in order to figure out how to best consolidate, because we have the oldest demographic of teachers in the country. We have teachers that are retiring. They're ready and willing to work with us to come up with solutions. And I'm not going to be the best person to come up with those solutions. Phil's not the best person to come up with those solutions. Those teachers and the school boards are the ones. So beating up the teachers in school, let me tell you another thing. Phil set a goal of 2.5% for the budgets to come in. This year they came in at 1.5%, and then Phil said it wasn't enough. I would have praised the fact they came in at 1.5%, and I would have said, okay, let's talk about our next step.
Christine, you're misleading everyone. I applauded the school boards when they came in at less than 2.5%. I said, you've done your job, now we have to do ours. We were facing, at that point, a 9-cent increase in property tax rates, and that's not acceptable. We're spending $1.7 billion. We increased spending this year. We didn't decrease anything. We increased spending. So we're just asking that we do this together, that we have the legislature come together and think about where we go in the future. Because if we do this right, if we have this continuum, this cradle-to-career approach, we could have the best education system in the country, the very best. We're nimble enough, we're small enough, we can do this. And if we do that, it'll be the biggest economic tool, the best economic tool that we could possibly have, because then we would have people coming. I think we agree there. A good education system will help everyone, and I believe it's doable.
Can you address the concern how you don't have communities that families don't then want to move to if you close the schools?
But remember, Act 46 they're not closing schools. These alternative governance structures, again, misleading, that didn't go through the agency. They're being considered by the Board of Education. That's their job now. It's not something, I didn't appoint them all. This is something that's been done throughout the last number of years. I've made two or three appointments thus far on this board. They'll take a look at this now and whether they approve of the alternative structure or not. It's their job to do that through Act 46, which is law. So it's not my decision. It's not the agency's decision. It's the Board of Education's decision at this point to approve or disapprove of the alternative structures for governance compliance, not for closing schools.
Let's talk about another big area of spending, healthcare. Mr. Scott, you recently indicated that you were in support of Medicare for All, which Ms. Hallquist has already said that she supports. It sounded like a relatively new position.
Yeah, no, I didn't say here in this state. I said if we pass anything, if we do it nationally, some sort of system, it puts everyone on the same plane, it's even keel, then that's fine. But for us to do something alone, single payer, we proved that didn't work. We've seen that movie. I mean, when you talk about Medicare for All in this state, just this state doing it, we went through 5 years of torture on that. And I believe that was detrimental to our economy. Because I know as a business person, when I don't know who's going to pay for it, how much it's going to cost, and I'm faced with, nobody was saying, I was open-minded. As Lieutenant Governor, I said, just prove it to me. Show me who's going to pay for it, how much it's going to be, and what it looks like. 5 years it took to finally come to the conclusion that we couldn't do it. It's too expensive for us as a state, a single state, to do it. So I said, when I'm in business and I hear 15, 16, 17% payroll tax, I don't expand. I don't do anything. I sit on my hands. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait and see what happens. And that's what a lot of companies, businesses did throughout Vermont. We've seen this movie. We know what the end is. We don't need to go through this again. If they want to do it on a national level, have at it. But we have other solutions. We're moving forward. We have a pilot project with an all-payer model where we look at the patient instead of fee-for-service. We're looking at holistically, how do we take care of it? How do we invest more in prevention? That's part of, whether it's education or healthcare, prevention is part of the answer. So that's where we're going, and I think that's exciting. And I think the government is looking to see what we're doing with that, because it's working thus far. We had a pilot project of 30,000 on our Medicaid population, and it came back favorable. It's working. We're going to expand that, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe that's the answer in the future.
So I hear more of the same. Let's wait for someone else to take action.
We're taking action. I just told you.
No, I'm talking about Medicare for All. Let me just point out that what I think you need from a leader is a leader that's going to figure out how to get it done. Now, making profits off of people sick and dying is wrong. We're the only developed nation that does that. The United States spends 18 cents of every dollar on health care. The European countries spend 8 or 9 cents, and they cover everybody. In Vermont, we spend 31 cents of every health care dollar on administration costs. Medicare is 5 cents. We will get it done, and the way we're going to get it done, it's the same way I work with the energy issues. We'll form a collaboration of states. There are many larger states, including California and Massachusetts, who want to achieve this goal. I'm the type of leader that's going to get out and make that happen with the other states. That's how you increase your pool. My point being, if you create the right vision, and it's the right vision, you keep working for it. If you don't have a leader who's working to get to Medicare for All, you should fire them and get one that will. Because, and we're not going to do that overnight, but that's our job. You know, it's you as a public, you as a voter, demand health care for all, because this system is failing.
I'll make it clear. If you want single payer in Vermont, don't vote for me.
And let me add another thing, too. I would immediately ask the legislature to bring up the universal primary care bill, because when I did the analysis on it, that pays for itself. Allowing people to go and see a doctor right away, I looked at the costs in terms of a payroll, and it's about a 0.5% delta. That 0.5% will be more than paid for by people getting to the doctor early. We can do universal primary care right away, and it will pay for itself. And I can show you the numbers.
One of the concerns that's been raised in Vermont is that there's been a change that allows small businesses to group together and get into the large company risk pool. A, are you aware of this problem? And B, is there anything that you think should be done to correct it? Let's start with you.
Well, small businesses getting into a greater risk pool is, that's the process today. To really deflect yourself from some individual health issues in your company. And of course, we did that at the co-op as well. But that's really kind of dealing with the bleeding. You know, you're putting Band-Aids over the bleeding, the blood keeps coming. We have to focus on changing this whole system.
Yeah, this has come up. The Congress decided to do away with the individual mandate and then allow these groups to get together, as they did historically over the last 25 years. We're going to allow them to go ahead and do that. They're part of some legislation that came through. I know it was controversial in the minds of some, but it was the last day of the session, the special session, and it was passed to. They wanted to put another penalty in Vermont on those who didn't have insurance. I thought that was unfair, that those who couldn't afford insurance shouldn't be penalized because they can't afford it. So we prevented that from happening, but what happened was the individual mandate went through, but there's no penalty. And we also put a panel together to take a look and see whether we even need it or not. I mean, it depends on the participation, if it continues. We have a high rate of participation with healthcare here in Vermont. And if that continues, if that's okay, then there's no reason to penalize. So this group has gotten together. It was a group that was made up of appointees from the legislature. I believe I had a couple of as well. But they haven't come to any conclusion at this point. But we're going to allow them to move forward with some of the groups to do what they want to do with the groups.
The Green Mountain Care Board is in charge of regulating hospital budgets, and one of its charges is to control costs. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fantastic, how well are they doing?
Well, I mean, they've been doing their job ever since it was created. Now, remember, the Green Mountain Care Board was put into effect because Governor Shumlin thought that the single payer was going to happen. So it was designed. We had BISCA before that, banking insurance, took care of oversight in that regard, and now it's the Green Mountain Care Board. So I think it's time to revisit what we're doing there, whether it needs to be a 5-person board or not. Maybe it needs to be, it could be a little bit smaller. We should take a look with the legislature on what we want out of the Green Mountain Care Board, because things have changed. And if we're not going to, and again, as long as I'm governor, I'm not interested in going to a single-payer system for Vermont alone. So we may want to take a look and see whether that should be changed or not. 1 to 10, they're controlling costs. I think they're doing a pretty good job, 6 or 7.
Before we get to your answer, I'm not understanding your point. You say that you would want to perhaps change the role.
Makeup. The makeup of there could be the role change. There could be the makeup of the board. But
whether you're doing single payer or not, isn't there a purpose?
The mandate has changed. I mean, if you look at the language, even some of their mission has changed. So I think we should take a re-look at that. And I believe the legislature has the same idea. I mean, it's not just me. They're looking at this as well.
Well, I will say the Green Mountain Care Board has done a great job of controlling costs of the nurses, but when it comes to administration, we need to take a tighter regulatory approach on that. You look at the disparity between the people doing the work and the administration. That administration cost is, in my eyes, too high. But again, we're continuing to talk about, trying to polish a rusty car here. The goal needs to be to move to Medicare for all, as well as immediately pass a primary care bill.
Would you support having the Green Mountain Care Board be able to regulate hospital administrative salaries?
Absolutely.
Would you?
Not individually. I think you should leave it up to the hospitals. There may be a parameter, a percentage of whatever your gross is. I mean, there could be something of that nature, but I wouldn't want to go in and individually tell them what to pay anybody.
Well, that sounds like it would have some sort of a cap associated with it. But
I'm not a cap. Maybe it's a percentage. I don't know. I'm just saying they can take a look at that, and they may. I'm not sure. But it's not something I'm advocating.
Do you think the executive pay at the University of Vermont Medical Center is excessive?
It's more than I make, and I know they have a tough role. But you know, from my standpoint, he's fairly well paid. He's one of the ones that probably makes over $1 million.
He does. Do you think it's excessive?
I'm sorry?
Do you think it is excessive?
For Vermont standards, it probably is. But again, we live in a global world. I think they should look at the administrative costs overall as a percentage of their gross.
I'm going to say, yes, they're definitely overpaid. And the rhetoric of, we're not going to get people to come work, we will. We'll get people to rise up and go up through the ranks. In my utility, I didn't make any more than 5 times what the lowest person did. And oh, by the way, 16 of the 20 highest paid people in the company were union workers. When I came to the company, I said, look, from this day on, we're all going to abide by the union contract. So whatever raise you get, I get. That's how it should work. We shouldn't be taking the leaders and letting them get, a 630+% rate increase over a 15-year period when the nurses are only getting, somewhere in the 30s or 40%. It really is about what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Did you actively support the nurses in this strike?
I did. I
Did you
walked
go
with the
out
nurses.
on the picket line?
Yes, I was out on the picket line.
What was your position?
I said that they should negotiate. I said that they should all go back to the table and continue to negotiate. I'm happy with the conclusion, and I thought that they all did a pretty good job in the end. I mean, I knew there was a strike there once for a couple of days, but after that, they came to the table and did the tough work.
Do you have any concerns about the health of Vermont's hospital system, and particularly the smaller ones?
Well, obviously, that's a concern. It's almost like our small schools in some respects. When we have our small hospitals, nobody wants to close their small hospitals either. And it's interesting, when we talk about schools or hospitals and so forth, many people want lower costs, and they would like to see other people maybe close their facilities, but never do they want their own to close. So we have a challenge system, but again, I think they're working better together today than ever, and I believe that they can all stay viable. We just have to have some coordination.
Well, I should point out that I'm very proud of my local hospital in Morrisville, Copley. The Green Mountain Care Board said, you're getting too many people coming here because we're so good with fractures. So there are, I think some of the local hospitals are doing a great job, and they have these specific expertise that they excel in, and that's a good thing. And I would argue the same with schools, too.
Do you have a concern about the future of the small hospitals here in Vermont or not?
No, I don't. I think the small hospitals, just like the schools, are going to be very viable in the future and important.
Okay, let me follow up on that. How is that going to be the case, particularly with the small schools? How are they going to be viable?
Because we're going to increase the population of Vermont. That's, as I told you before, we studied at this national level. What's happening in rural Vermont is the same thing that's happening in rural America. We've gone in parts of rural America with 1/3 the density of Vermont, connected every home and business with fiber, and changed the demographics. So again, this is just like the 30s when the cities had electricity and rural America did not. Forgive me, but I think humankind did their greatest work connecting every home and business with an electric wire in the 30s, and it changed rural America.
Mr. Scott, you've also talked about increasing the population here in Vermont. You've talked about increasing it some 70,000. This is a state that it's actually seen a decline in population.
Yeah, very concerning. Obviously, we talk about it's probably our biggest challenge, demographics. We're an aging state, again, second oldest in the country. If we don't change our ways, we'll be number one, and it won't be for the good of Vermont either. Maine's number one, by the way. So I do believe we need to grow the population. I believe we need more immigration. I believe we need to do whatever we can to attract more people into the state. We can't wait. The low birth rate throughout the Northeast is problematic. That's why we're seeing 30,000 fewer students in our schools. I mean, when we think about the ripple effect of that, we think about our colleges, our college and university, they're struggling as well. And a lot of it is because in the state college system in itself, it's typically used by those from the state. Well, when you have 30,000 fewer kids in our schools, the ripple effect is that there's fewer kids available to go to school when they graduate. So we're all feeling this, and what we need to do, again, I believe, is focus on the fundamentals, trying to do whatever we can to make Vermont more affordable. And that is, we can't overtax, we can't overburden, and we have to make it attractive for people to come and stay and live, because it is a great place to live, work, and play. But we need to make it more financially feasible for them as well.
I got news for you. Financially feasible is not the way we're going to get there, because we've got, as I pointed out, we've got the same issue all over rural America. What I don't hear is a plan for getting there. I heard the governor say we're going to grow organically. If we're going to grow organically, how come we're down 30,000 people? We need to build the infrastructure. Giving people $10,000 a year to move here when you don't have the infrastructure, that's a flawed model.
Christine, I didn't say, you're not listening closely enough. I didn't say that we're going to grow the population organically. I said we were going to grow revenue organically through increased growth, increased emphasis on the economy. And we did that. In the first 2 years, no tax or fees, we grew the economy, bringing more revenue in. We're spending more money. But what we need to do, we need to attract more people here. And if it isn't about the economics, if it isn't about the affordability, we've been raising taxes for the last couple of decades, 2 or 3 decades, increasing every single year. That's not working. We have a stagnant population. We have a small population decline. That's not working. So we have to do something different.
Well, I got to tell you, as I said before, just controlling costs, I've seen lots of companies go out of business doing that. It's about making those strategic investments that help us grow.
Which we're doing. The Think Vermont initiative, we tried to pass that through the legislature. It wasn't well received, but we're going to go back at it. We're making all kinds of investments. Free college for those joining the National Guard, that's going to help. We should remove the tax on military pensions. That's going to help. It's going to bring more people in, prevent people from leaving. If you make it more affordable for them to stay here, they're not going to leave for other opportunity. And it's as simple as that.
Ms. Hallquist mentioned the $10,000 lure to come to Vermont. Is this a program that's been successful, or I mean, I think many people view it as kind of a joke.
Yeah, it's incredible in some respects. It's faced some criticism. And it wasn't our initiative, by the way. This was something that was derived by the legislature. And I had the same, when I saw it, I signed it. I wasn't sure about the outcome, whether this was going to work. And we heard pretty soon from many Vermonters who said, hey, I've been burdened for the last 30 years. How about writing me a check for $10,000? But when you think about that, the remote worker program, if you can bring someone in that can work remotely, and they buy a home, and then they pay property taxes, and then they utilize services, buy products, pay taxes, income taxes, and so forth, that's helpful. Now, what was surprising to me was I didn't think anybody would come for $10,000. I wouldn't move to another state for $10,000. We've had over 2,000 inquiries about this alone. It's been incredibly successful. We should take a lesson from it. And I'm going to ask the legislature to take a look. For $10,000, people are willing to come to the state. Maybe we should use some sort of incentive program to bring in whatever groups we need. Who do we need in this state? If we need more people in the trades. The average age of a construction worker in the state of Vermont right now is 58 years old. Think about that. In 5 or 10 years, when you need an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter, an auto technician, a truck driver, I don't care if it's a CDL or a PhD, we need to have more people here, and we need to help them get trained. But again, if $10,000 brings them here, that's good. Yesterday, anecdotally, I was at our VOREC Council, the Outdoor Recreation Council, and they were saying there was a company in the Northeast Kingdom and I hear people looking for engineers all over the state all the time. They look for engineers, and they said, we don't have any trouble finding engineers. And I said, well, how do you do it? Oh, we advertise for engineers in a mountain bike magazine, and we get engineers because they want to come to the state to bike.
Well, I'm just going to keep going on the refrain that you can try to attract all the people they want to come here, but I guarantee you, young people and business people aren't going to come here if they can't get connected.
You've talked a lot about this idea of extending broadband. One of our readers suggested that there might even be a next technology of wireless that would make putting all of this fiber out there as ridiculous as what copper seems like today.
Yeah, let me point out the physics. Forgive me if I go into the weeds here, but fiber is the fastest connection we have. With radio frequency, cellular, when you try to get more data rates, you have to go up in frequency. When you go up in frequency, you need to have more repeaters. When you go up in frequency, you can't get around the hills. Radio frequency will not work in the state of Vermont. I've studied this for 18 years. But even more importantly is every single one of those radio towers need fiber backhaul because radio does not have the capacity of fiber. Fiber is like the electric wire. We hung our electric wires in the 30s. It's the same thing today. You're getting down to the physics. Understanding the physics of telecommunications, we know that a fiber optic cable will last longer than a wire. And by the way, we're still using fiber that we put up in the 70s. So it, from a physics standpoint, has the greatest capacity, and you don't need, we don't know anything faster than the speed of light in our universe today, of course, unless you're getting near a black hole, then you're doing something different.
Yeah, so I agree. You need a trunk, a main line. I think of it as a water main, a large main, which is your fiber optic backbone. But at the same time, I don't know if AT&T, who's working on a proposal as we speak, testing this in another state, of using a repeater system on existing utility lines. And it's a nylon type of antenna that fits on the outside of an existing utility line. So if you have electricity, you'll be able to use a repeater system with this technology. Now, whether it works or not, they're working on it right now. They've seen some success. If it works in the other states, I've tried to talk them into bringing it here to try it out, and we'll see. But if you have a utility line, it makes sense to me, a repeater system of that sort, and back it up with fiber optic, and maybe that's part of the answer.
Last question before we go to our closing comments. The opioid crisis continues to be a huge problem. Ms. Hallquist, let's start with you. Give us something specific here that would be productive and hopeful for us to hear.
Well, let me just point out what we know doesn't work in terms of substance use issues. Since Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs, we've spent $1 million, and we haven't reduced drug use at all. But we have targeted families by race and broken up families. So we know that doesn't work. Let's talk about something that is working. I spent the afternoon a couple weeks ago with Grace Keller at the Howard Safe Recovery Center in Burlington. It's a needle exchange. If you remember 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had needles on the streets of Burlington, and people were complaining about those needles. And Burlington residents struggled with the idea that we're going to put this in our neighborhood. But we put that in their neighborhood. We leaned into our discomfort. Last year, 300,000 needles were exchanged, and virtually none were found on the streets. Those that were there, the staff went out and picked up. There were so few. Now let me point out something more important. Clean needles will avoid 6 heart valve transplants a year in the Chittenden County area. A heart valve transplant costs an average of $620,000. 6 times 620,000 is 3.72 million. Her total budget was 420,000. We can afford to put a full-time nurse there because when somebody who has a substance use issue asks for help, they have to wait an average of 17 days in order to get that help. And of course, they use a lot during those 17 days. So we will put that full-time nurse in, and we will repeat that model throughout the state. And I would add another thing. I want to make a point. When we leaned into our discomfort, we found better solutions. And I also think we need to seriously look at harm reduction sites as well.
This crisis that we're facing right now isn't partisan. This is something that affects each and every one of us. And if you don't think it does, it hasn't affected you, you just don't know it yet, because it has. Somebody in your family, somebody you know, has been inflicted by this incredible disease. I want to give credit where credit's due. Governor Shumlin talked about this in the State of the State address. I was sitting behind him as Lieutenant Governor. I wasn't quite sure whether this was the right approach, whether we should be highlighting this and showing the world that we had a problem, but he was right, and he did that, and I give him great credit for that. I also give Rutland a lot of credit because you recognized it before he did with Project Vision, and Project Vision was a concept that you bought into, invested in, and it's had incredible benefits. I took that model when I came into office and wanted to expand it onto a statewide level. That's why I came up with the Opioid Coordination Council. I am named a director of drug abuse prevention because I wanted to hear directly from her. Jolinda LeClaire is our director. I wanted to hear from her what we could do. And this council we put together is from people from all walks of life, all different parties, all different backgrounds. And it's been incredibly helpful. We opened a new hub. We had a waiting list in Chittenden County when I came into office of about over 700. And we know if someone's ready for treatment, you better have it ready. So we opened a new hub or a new treatment facility in St. Albans, and it reduced that number to 0. And that's what we need to continue to do throughout the state. We're going to have to work at this together. And there are new initiatives that we should contemplate. I went to, the good news is the state of Vermont is a leader in this regard. Our hub and spoke model is something that is envied. It's being copied by California as we speak, because I went to Congress with Al Gobey, my Secretary of Human Services. We testified in Congress, and they learned a lot, had a lot of good questions for us, not like the treatment we've seen over the last couple of weeks. They were interested in what we were doing in the state, and they continue to look at us to be the model for the future. So I look at a four-legged stool. It's about prevention, treatment, recovery, and enforcement. And we have to do more in each and every regard, and we're doing that as we speak.
Time now for closing statements, and we begin with Christine Hallquist.
Well, I'm going to start by saying I voted for Phil Scott, but I'm disappointed. You know, when I look at what's happened over the past 2 years, you know, it appears we're focused on division, and we're focused on this model of command and control rather than unity and collaboration. When I hear the governor talk about taking care of vulnerable Vermonters and vetoing a bill that raises the minimum wage, vetoing a bill that allows family leave, vetoing a bill that protects children from toxics in toys, and vetoing a bill that would help make polluters pay, I wonder what vulnerable population the governor is concerned about. Now, I am a person that pulls people together to do big things. When I started at the co-op in 2005, the co-op was on the edge of bankruptcy, and the state was ready to put it out of business, had the highest electric rates in the state, and the highest costs. I pulled the employees together, and I said, look, I've got a lot of business experience, but I only give myself a 10% chance. But if we pull together, we can do great things. And I also said, from this day on, we all abide by the union contract, including myself. Whatever raise you get, I get. 5 years later, we were invited down to the Department of Energy. They told us we were the most innovative utility in the nation. We cut our outages by more than 1/2. We went from junk bond status to essentially an A+ rated by our rating agency. People would tell you that's impossible with the size of our company. But I know what's possible when people pull together. we can do incredibly great things, including growing Vermont. And I'm also going to tell you that this isn't the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm not the type of person that's going to cower in front of the headwinds from Washington. And I'm going to work hard for the Vermont I love and that has loved me in return. And I also will tell you, nothing is impossible when you're on the side of justice.
I want to thank Vermont Digger and Mark for moderating this event, and all of you for coming. Over the last 2 years, my focus as governor has been to grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable. Giving our kids the best education possible is part of our mission, and protecting those every single day, those interests. And we're making progress. We haven't raised a single tax or fee over the last 2 years for our general fund budget. We cut income taxes by $30 million, including eliminating the tax on Social Security for low and moderate income Vermonters. We prevented $71 million in property tax rate increases. We made the single largest investment in workforce housing Vermont has ever seen. And we passed tuition-free college for those entering the National Guard. And we've done a lot more than just those. We're doing the hard work, but making Vermont more affordable can't happen overnight. And all our efforts are tied to one common element, and that's leadership. And that's what I'd like to end on. You know, we have a lot to be proud of here in Vermont. We've always been known for our compassion, our tolerance, our Yankee ingenuity, our independence, and the strength of our communities. And now it's time for all of us to prove it. With our nation so divided and polarized, it's clear to me that Vermont can set an example for the country to follow. We must rise above the partisanship. We must be better role models and treat all people with dignity and respect, the respect they deserve. It's important that we don't let our differences and our disagreements divide us. We can and we should lead by example. We should show our youth how to engage in important, complex, and sometimes emotional debates with both conviction and civility. Because it's okay to disagree, but we can do it respectfully. We can prove that the strength of our nation is the diversity of our people and our opinions. And we can demonstrate that listening to and learning from each other is how we make the progress we make as a nation and as a state. Now, I've never, my 18 years, this is my 10th election, I've never run a negative campaign in my life. And that won't change now or ever. I've always treated others with respect and dignity, regardless of what's said about me. I've done it in business and politics and racing. And I've always made decisions based on what I believe is the right thing to do for Vermont and Vermonters, regardless of the political consequences. So I hope in these polarizing times, we can put all that together, pull together as a state and as a nation to recommit to doing things the right way, the Vermont way, because I believe our future depends on it. So again, I thank you for coming tonight.
Let's thank both of our candidates for joining us tonight. And thank all of you for joining us tonight. That's going to wrap things up, and people can go out into the lobby, and we have some refreshments out there. Thanks.